We are so excited to be chatting to Eleanor from SqHer Mile today, talking all about finances, money, and growing your wealth. Thanks for joining. Can't wait to have this conversation. This is going to be fun.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's start at the beginning. Do you want to just quickly talk through your passion for money and growing your wealth? For those of you who don't know, my name is Meggie Palmer, and I'm the founder of PepTalkHer, and we're a company on a mission to close the gender pay gap. Money, salary is something that's super important to me, something that I'm really passionate about, because we know that when women have more money, awesome things happen in the world. PepTalkHer is all about helping you get promoted faster and getting paid more money. And SqHer Mile is all about helping women grow their wealth, right, Eleanor?
Yeah, correct. So I think my love for money probably started at quite a young age. I grew up in a family where money wasn't in abundance. We didn't have much of it. And it was actually quite a contentious topic. Both my parents were self-employed, and there just wasn't a lot of money around, and there was always arguments around it. I was very lucky to go to a school where it was a very good school. I was on a funded place, and the people around me had lots of money, and I kept seeing what this could do for people and how much their life was different from mine. So it kind of kicked in from a very young age. I then Googled what job pays the best, and banking came up. This was a good 15 years ago, maybe more. So decided to go to uni to study economics because that's what bankers did. I loved economics. I really had a passion for it, but I had no clue about the world of finance or banking. I really did not understand it. And even when I was studying economics and my first few jobs in the city, no one really taught me what to do with my money. I just kind of earned my salary. I did not negotiate my salary. I did not invest my salary, and I was not smart with my money. And it was only probably when I hit about 24 or 25 that I had a job where one of my tasks was looking at the gender investment gap and looking at how our clients, I worked for a bank that looked after very wealthy individuals, whether we also had a gender investment gap. So whether our male clients were richer than our female clients. And it blew my mind. It absolutely blew my mind that this existed on every single level and no one was really talking about it. And I thought, I'm in my mid-20s. I've studied banking. I work in banking and I still don't know what to do with my money. I don't know how to invest. So I'm going to do something about it. So I set up SqHer Mile as an Instagram account. It was my husband that really encouraged me. He was then my boyfriend, to set it up and just said, start posting like little snippets about money and just get the conversation going. And it grew quite rapidly at the beginning. And there's now quite a lot of finance accounts on Instagram, and that is amazing. But at the beginning, I really was just kind of the only one. And I just talked about investing, pensions, side hustles, and it's really just grown from there. And it was when I had my son, so in the last couple of years, I decided not to return to my corporate job and to kind of give this a whirl full-time, part-time, and also looking after my son. So yeah, that's kind of the journey.
Love it, love it, love it. I think that's really relatable to a lot of people on the call. For anyone, one of the things that we were talking about before the session started today, obviously the cost of living is going up. Some people's salaries are going up. Certainly we're hearing awesome stories from folks in the PepTalkHer community who are getting 5, 10. We had one person get a 20% pay raise yesterday. So wow. She's up of 200,000 now, which is awesome. But a lot of people's wages are stagnating. We know that inflation is high. So the cost of bananas, clothes, everything is more than it used to be. What can we do? Like, what can folks do literally today to start actively thinking about growing their wealth and their money?
Yeah, for sure. So it is really tough at the moment. My last corporate job, I was not getting pay rises in line with inflation. They were always under inflation. And that used to be something that was a bugbear to me. I always say, and this is definitely your area of expertise, start with your primary source of income. See if you can maximize that. I think it's so important not to disregard that. But if we're not talking about primary income, because I'll definitely let you cover that, is I then start to look at how can you earn extra income? So can you do any side hustles? You don't have to be setting up a whole business on the side of working your very busy job, but can you, I don't know, do some surveys, market research, just something on your commute that makes a little bit of extra money. And then with the money that you're earning, so either from your primary income or your side hustle, you need to educate yourself on how to manage that money. It is so important. And where the gender investment and gender pension gap comes from is the fact that females are far less likely to invest their money. Now, why this leads to a kind of detrimental effect for females is the fact that investing historically has outperformed cash pretty much every year. So if you are sat in cash, you are losing money because inflation is often eating away at your wealth. So you need to educate yourself on how to invest. You should be investing your money just in general and also for the future, so for retirement. So we really look at kind of increasing your salary, your primary and your side hustle, and then investing that money. So making that money work hard for you. And it really is a snowball effect. Once you start to really focus on it, I'm sure you've all heard about the power of compounding and your money making money on itself when it's invested. It really is just a snowball effect. And I think once you start to take charge of kind of growing your wealth, you really will start to see benefits.
And what we might do is, I know we've got a heap of folks who are expecting this recording, wanting to watch it back because of different time zones. For the people who are on the call, if you want to jump onto video, go ahead. And maybe to Eleanor's question, maybe you can pop in the chat or jump off of mute and just let us know, like, are you invested in the market right now, or are you, overwhelmingly in cash? And there's no judgment, by the way. But you can let us know in the chat, are you more in cash or more in investments? You can just put cash or investments in the chat. And Megan, do you want to just jump off of mute? What about you? Where do you sit in this spectrum?
Yeah, so unfortunately, it fills my stomach with dread every time I hear you say this, Eleanor. But yeah, I'm in cash, more in investment at the moment, which is definitely not something I want to be in. But I'm kind of at this point where do I start? So that's very much why I enjoy topics like this, to understand how to get into the better side than cash.
And it is so important to have a buffer of cash. You should never have all your money in investments because, for example, if something bad was to happen or your boiler broke, your car broke, you don't want to liquidate those investments in an emergency. You want to use your cash buffer. So having cash is good. But once you've got about 6 months of living expenses saved in cash, then it is so important to start looking at investing. There's loads of different ways at the moment, depending on what country you're in. There are so many different investment platforms that really do it for you. All you need to do is go to that investment platform, say you want it done for you, answer a set of questions, and they will suggest the portfolio for you. They will put you in that portfolio, and all you need to do is add your money. They really are so good for beginning investors, and these didn't exist 10 years ago. So we're in a very lucky situation where you don't have to have any knowledge on investing, and there are those apps that will just do it for you nowadays.
So let's talk about that, because I think not a lot of people know that. A lot of people, I feel like, and Megan, maybe you can let us know if this is you too. A lot of people think, I need to have an MBA in finance. I need to be an investment banker. I need to work in mergers and acquisitions to know how to invest successfully. One of the things that I think is really interesting is this concept of robo-advisors, which, for those of you who don't know, is essentially automated investing. So you direct a certain amount of money into your robo-advisor platform of choice, and then they, based on your risk portfolio, kind of split it into high risk, medium risk, low risk, combination of gold, bonds, and stocks, which the fees are a little higher than if you DIY, but at least something is happening. So actually, even though I know how to invest, Eleanor, I actually use robo-advisors because I'm a little bit lazy and I will forget otherwise.
And so do I. It was my job for 5 years to invest people's money, and I use robo-advisors because I do not have the time to sit there and invest and research individual companies that I want to invest in. I want to just put a set amount of money away each month, and someone who does have the time, it's their job, they're paid to do it, put my money away in an investment for me. So I do use robo-advisors. I do also pick my own investments, but I am time poor, and robo-advisors are perfect for people that are time poor or low in confidence.
And it's just all automatic. So in the interest of being busy folks and wanting to automate, delegate, it's just such a good way Yeah, it's a bit annoying because you have to set it up and it might take you 20 minutes or an hour or whatever. But if you do that and then it's just kind of set and forget-ish, and you know, again, full disclosure, you know, neither of us can give you official financial advice. This is just like generic information for you to sort of take with and do what you will. But it's definitely worth, you know, investigating robo-advisors. Like in Australia, there's StockSpot. In the United States, there's Betterment and Wealthfront. And Eleanor, there's a heap in the UK too, right?
Yeah, there's so many, and this is going to be a shameless plug, but I've just built a tool called WTS, or Where to Start. And what it does is it basically asks you a set of questions, and will spit out the investment platforms that match your criteria. So for example, if you've said you're someone that's a beginner, you want it all done for you, and you want to just have a general investment account, or you're saving for retirement, it will show you all the robo investors that are around that match your criteria and can help you. And then you just click through, answer their set of questions, and you go. I challenge you to take more than 10 minutes doing it. It's quick.
Yeah, and that's one of the most awesome things about it, is that it saves time, and like time is money, as we know. So you mentioned the 6 months of living expenses as sort of a buffer, and I was mentioning in the chat, like I was asking people, are you more cash or investments? I'm more investments, Eleanor, but I will say a year ago we bought a house and we were over leveraged in investments because we actually didn't have enough liquid cash to make up the deposit. So and also the stock market had gone down. So we were like, oh, because, you know, if we'd sold the stocks, we would have sold at a loss, blah, blah, blah. So we had to like scrounge every like $500 amount to kind of get up to the deposit because I was silly and I'd gone too far the other way. So we actually didn't have that emergency buffer in cash as much as we should have. So that's just a little like, you know, I guess a warning that like you think, oh, I'm doing the right thing, I'm investing. And then when the market goes bad, it actually can kind of bite you.
Yeah, 100%. And we did the same when we were buying our house. It was certain things were more expensive than we anticipated. And we did have our cash buffer. We had our deposit in cash. We were ready. But then there were certain elements where we thought we're going to have to liquidate some investments here. And some of them were down, but you just have to be, if you understand that, I think it's okay. But the cash buffer is there to stop that happening. Sometimes things happen. Hopefully your investments will be a positive return, and so you therefore will have made money, and liquidating those investments will be a positive thing. But the general rule of thumb is that you should have been invested for 5 years plus, because that allows your investments time and the market's time to kind of smooth out the volatility and hopefully be up on the position that you started. So the cash buffer is there for emergencies and short-term liquidity. And then investing, if you were going to buy a house next year, do not invest that money. If you're thinking about buying a house in 10 years' time, or you're saving for your son's 18th birthday and he's now 1, investing is the way to go. And although there's risks with investing, that time should be enough time for the market to do its thing and you to have positive returns. I think Meggie's frozen.
Because statistically speaking, do you have the data on like, do you have the data, Eleanor, in terms of like, because, you know, I think sometimes people think, oh, the market only ever goes up, but actually it goes both ways. And and to your point, typically you would be looking at a minimum 5-year time frame.
Yeah, so definitely. So let's just take the S&P 500. So that is the 500 largest companies in the US. It's a massive index. You can buy a tracker fund, which is 0.06%. That's how much it costs you. It's super cheap. It's fairly low risk because if you think about it, there's 500 companies in that tracker. The chances of all 500 going bust, if that happens, we've probably got more things on our plate to worry about. The chances are extremely slim. Yes, one of those companies might go bust, but if you think there's 499 other companies holding up that index, yes, there'll be a little bit of contagion. There might be a little bit of volatility, but it's one of the lower risk investments you can buy. In the past 30 years, when you're looking at the annual return, so of course it's gone up, down, up, down, up, down, it's annualized over 11% a year. So there are years that it's finished down 12%, but overall, in the last 30 years, it has annualized 11% each year, which I just think is insane when you think about how it is a fairly low risk investment and you're able to deliver those returns.
And one of the things that's interesting as well, when we look at professionals and folks who've had success in terms of investing, Warren Buffett, his estate, when he dies, I believe it's 80% plus or 90% plus, Eleanor, of his estate will go into essentially like ETFs, right? It'll go into those buckets rather than all going into Google or all going into Walmart. His will stipulates that the majority of his money needs to go into those S&P trackers or similar, because he knows, as like a total guru, that actually that's the lower risk and the better return in the long run.
Yeah. And in my many years of looking at investments and managing money, diversification really is key. Having a diversified investment, so that means something that has exposure to lots of different companies. If you buy just 2 companies in the S&P 500, so you've just bought 2 random companies that you like the look of, the chances of one of them doing really well, yes, it could happen and you could really outperform the S&P 500, but you could also have a company that does really badly and is the worst performer in the S&P 500. If you've got a diversified portfolio, and you don't have to buy the whole S&P 500, you could still have a portfolio of, say, 60 to 100 companies, the likelihood of you having positive returns at the end of your investing journey is much higher. Yes, you might not have that anomaly where you've outperformed the market 10x. You might not become a millionaire overnight, but the likelihood of you losing money is a lot less when you diversify.
And what about for people who are in debt right now? If they're in credit card debt, or in the United States, obviously student loan debt is a big thing. How do you like people to think about looking at the interest rate of that debt versus the possibility of, success in the market?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it comes up a lot. And our student finance debt is a little bit different, but it's still a debt with an interest rate. So normally the rule of thumb is you don't start investing until you've paid off your debt, built up your cash buffer, start investing. However, for example, there's a few kind of like contentious points in that, and people will argue different ways. So for example, a mortgage, people will not pay that off before starting investing, because a mortgage is a debt that the likelihood of you paying off in the next 5 to 10 years is pretty small. Student finance for us as well, the way it's managed, some people choose to still have the student finance debt and also start investing. It really does then become down to personal preference. And if you're unable to make that decision for you, then speaking to a financial advisor. But it all comes down to whether you think the returns on your investment are going to outperform the interest rate that you're paying on your debt. So for example, I have a 0% credit card where I purchase things for our new house. That's 0%. I am not paying any interest on that debt. Therefore, I am happy to be investing, because my investments are annualizing about 10% annually return. If I had credit card debt that was 30%, say a store card or one of those high interest rate credit cards, I'm paying 30% a year to the bank to keep this credit card, I should not be investing, because my investments, like I said, are annualizing around 10%. Therefore, it doesn't make sense. You also have to remember that investments are volatile. That 10% return is not guaranteed, but I have to pay that 30% credit card interest. So you really do have to kind of look at your whole balance sheet before starting investing. As tempting as it might be to jump straight in and go, I want to invest.
And who, because I feel like sometimes people are like, so one of the things that I have heard people do as well, if you're wanting to get into the habit, even if you've got student debt, even if you've got credit card debt, yes, you should aggressively pay that off, but maybe you could do $20 a month that's automated into a robo-advisor, or something that's like a small amount so that you get into the habit, but hopefully you're driving more of your disposable cash into driving down those debts, so you're not going to pay interest, but you're in that habit of regularly investing, so that as and when the debt's paid off, you can hopefully increase that significantly.
Yeah, definitely. I've got a friend who did very similar. She wanted to invest £50 a month, but had debt that she wanted to pay off. And what she did is she focused all her kind of side hustle income on paying off that debt. So she knew that was all going towards that, but she still was learning how to invest and learning how it felt, seeing her investments go up and down. And that was a personal choice that she had made. If you ran the numbers, is that the most sensible thing to do? No, but that's what made her happy and her confident and her kind of start understanding the investment markets whilst also focusing on paying down her debt.
Yeah, totally. And, to your point earlier, Eleanor, one of the most, the easiest thing you can do in terms of wanting to grow your wealth, or if you're sitting here going like, oh my gosh, my mortgage is hectic and I have all these costs or whatever, like I can't afford to invest. What I would say to you, the best place to look probably is your salary. So if you're a freelancer, maybe you want to look at changing your rates. If you're a side hustler, or if you're a full-time salaried person, you should be having a conversation about your pay and benefits at least once a year. Because if you don't, you'll be like one of my clients. And she said to me a couple of months ago when she joined our program, she was like, oh no, I can't ask for a raise. And I was like, oh, why not? She's like, oh, I did that once. And they said no. And I was like, oh, when did you do that? And she was like, 5 years ago. So she asked for a raise 5 years ago and never asked again. And so her salary didn't change for 5 years. And you can imagine with inflation over the past 5 years, she's essentially, in terms of real sense of money, she's been sliding backwards. So you have to ask every year, at least. They might say no, but if you don't ask, unfortunately, some bosses are just not going to offer, right? So you've got to be the one on the front foot asking the question. And I'll pop a link in the chat to a cheat sheet that's pretty handy that kind of will map some of that out for you and make it really easy to figure out the language to ask, because that's the biggest asset, whether you're earning £30,000 or £200,000 a year, 70,000 US or 300,000 US. It's like, if you can increase that by 3% or 7%, or like one of my students, 20%, she just got a 20% raise. That's substantial. And then all of a sudden you can be like, well, I'm just going to pretend I didn't get a raise and I'm going to funnel all that into investments. And then hopefully, sit at that sort of, what is it, Eleanor, like 5 to 12% is what you would normally expect return on investment wise.
Yeah, so the S&P 500 is about 10% return. The FTSE 100 is about a 7% annualized return. Again, not guaranteed returns, but this is historically what they've done over the last 30 years.
Yeah. And it's not fun or sexy often, is it, to kind of think about like, what will Meggie in 7 years want? Or even more boring, like what will Meggie in retirement want? It's like, but I feel like the older I get, Eleanor, the more I start to think about that stuff.
100%. Yeah, I recently was having a conversation with a girl in my DMs on SqHer Mile, and she said, oh, I'm paying this into my pension and I'm pretty happy with it. I'm paying 10% in. I'm thinking of putting that down and just like investing in my stocks and shares ISA or in my general investment account. And I said, have you used a pension calculator? Have you checked what you're due to retire on based on what you're putting in now? And she was like, no, I haven't. I just feel like it's enough. And she did it and she was shocked. She was like, this is not enough. I need to up my pension contributions. And there are so many amazing tools on the web that you can use to check that you're on the right track. Pensions for kind of our generation, I think, is going to be a real sticking point. I don't think we're contributing enough in general. So yeah, that's a word of warning from me. Do a pension calculator.
It's not sexy, but it's important. And if you've got any questions for Eleanor or I, please pop them in the chat and we'll get to as many of those as possible. On that point about pensions, I talked earlier about you've got to ask for a pay raise every year. The other thing that you can also do, it's a little different in some countries. In Australia, the pension contributions are mandated. I think that's the same in the UK. In the US, it's variable. So if you're an executive, you might get a bigger contribution. It's something you can actually negotiate with some employers. Sometimes they won't give you a bigger base salary, but they'll be like, we'll increase your pension contributions from 3 to 5%. So, I just think don't forget that there's other non-monetary things that you can actually negotiate. Annual leave is something that you can negotiate as well. One of my students just got an extra 6 days annual leave off of the books, which means that now she's got 6 days to either chill out and relax or to do some side hustle work, that she can then funnel that money into investing as well. So thinking about little tweaks like that can have a big difference, because, we talked about pensions. It's so boring. And I can't even believe we're talking about this because, Meggie 5 years ago would have rolled her eyes and unlogged in. But to your point, like I have had a decent job for a long time. And even when I plug in the pension calculator, it's not as good of a scene as it could be. Like it's okay, but I'm not like doing crazy trips around the world on that pension. Like I need to really step it up. It's kind of scary.
Yeah, I agree. I was the same. And until the pension contributions were mandated in the UK, I was contributing £36 a month to my pension, and I was earning a good wage. Just 25-year-old Eleanor was like, I have flights to Ibiza to pay for. I don't want to contribute to my pension. Now, 32-year-old Eleanor is cursing that girl, because if I look at just investment growth over those last 7 years, if I had just even doubled what I was putting in, I'd be in a much better situation now. Because it's not just the amount you're putting in now, it's that potential investment growth. And I'm not going to retire for another 30 years. So every penny I put in now counts, because it's going to have time to kind of grow and compound over those 30 years. So yeah, past Eleanor was naughty with her pension.
I know. It's one of those things. I wish they taught us less algebra at school and more about compounding interest, pensions. But the good news is that we have Eleanor and SqHer Mile now, who can kind of help bridge that gap for us. We're going to be respectful of your time and, wrap this session up. You will get a recording, but Eleanor, before we go, next steps for the one thing that folks can do today to start to grow their wealth.
I think educate yourself, and if you haven't begun that investment journey, start looking at beginning that, because investing is really, in my opinion, although it carries risks, the only way to really grow your wealth once you've nailed your salary.
Totally agree. And Eleanor, can you pop in the chat your link to your tracker as well? I've put a link into my favorite US robo-advisor, which is Betterment. So I'll put that link in again, but also in Australia, I really love StockSpot for robo-advisors. I'll put those links in the chat. This is for those of you in the US, and then if StockSpot is in Australia. But Eleanor, I know you've got some really great ones for folks in the UK too, who are just wanting to automate.
Yeah, for sure. So I put the link to the quiz there that you can take to find the best investment platform for you. But I'll also write about the best kind of robo investors, or the ones that I've used and the ones that I like. There are so many in the UK.
And I think it's about, don't worry about the overwhelm. If as long as it's backed and as long as it's got that insurance guaranteed by the government in the jurisdiction that you're in, I just think don't worry too much about which one you choose. Just choose one and get started. It's about momentum and automating that so that at least, you've made some progress. That's what we really hope for everyone who's joined the session today.
100%.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Eleanor. Thanks to everyone. If you've got ongoing questions, DM SqHer Mile on Instagram, DM PepTalkHer me on Instagram. Say hi, don't be a stranger. Let us know any learnings that you've had today. We've got a super quick question here as well from Tanya about prioritizing stocks and share ISA. So this is a question specifically for folks in the UK.
Mm-hmm. Are you saying, is your question about prioritizing it over your pension, or is this, you've done your pension, you're happy with the amount you're investing? Is it a stocks and shares ISA over a general investment account? If it's a stocks and shares ISA over a general investment account, there are tax advantages to using a stocks and shares ISA. You can grow your money in a tax-free manner, something that you cannot do in a general investment account. So for sure, until you have maximized your stocks and shares ISA per year, so £20,000 a year, you're allowed to put into that stocks and shares ISA, I would definitely focus on that. But if you're talking about pensions and stocks and shares ISA, then it's very much down to your personal situation. Use that pension calculator, make sure you've got enough for retirement, and then start looking at your stocks and shares ISA.
It's a good question because it's interesting. The United Kingdom and the United States have programs. Over here, it's called a Roth and all these different things. But essentially, there are accounts that you can grow tax-free. You can actually invest your shares tax-free. You can't do that in Australia other than your retirement account. But in the UK and the USA, you can. And so if you don't need that money until retirement age, it can be a really good tax advantaged way of having some extra, retirement savings. But you got to balance that with, am I going to need it in the next 30 or 40 years? So it's not always an easy decision, but, getting that momentum and getting started is really valuable. Thank you for your valuable questions. Eleanor, you're a legend. Thanks for all your contributions. We'll all be in touch. And yes, say hi on social media and hit us up with any other questions. Thanks so much, y'all. Bye.
Thanks, Meggie. Bye.